All right, hello, hello, hello. Let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone, to Contemporary Black Horror. My name is Jalondra A. Davis. I am an assistant professor. Well, I work as. I always say my institutional affiliation is not my identity. So I work as an assistant professor I was an adjunct for 10 years. It's dating, not marriage, right? So I work as an assistant professor at UC Riverside. I'm a Black feminist, creative, intellectual. That is who I am. And yeah, we're talking about horror today. I don't know how much to talk about myself. My bio's not in the program, so we'll move on. So we have two panelists at present with us. I'm going to hold the space for if we get the other two, but it looks like we just have a nice, juicy little duo here. And I think I will let's introduce now. So we have Emily Burkett. Well, let's start with Mabalia. We have Mabalia Thomas of the University of Arizona, presenting Jay-Z's lyrical monstrosity in the Gothic single Monster. Mabalia or Dr. Thomas, however you like to be referred to, is an associate professor of English applied linguistics at the University of Arizona. Her research interest investigates the linguistic and testimonial injustices committed against non-native and non-standard speakers of American English, and the everyday creative practices these speakers adopt to resist and address linguistic injustice. We also have Emily Burkett of Indiana University of Pennsylvania, reimagining the Black hero in Jordan Peele's Nope. Emily is a PhD candidate in the Literary Criticism Program at Indiana University of Pennsylvania and a high school English teacher in Charleston, South Carolina. Her 2023 paper, Paul's Case, Masculine Heteronormativity in the Labor Class, was published in the Journal of a Journal of Alternative Sexualities in the Ancient and Modern Literature in the Arts. Her paper, Reimagining the Black Hero in Jordan Peele's Nope, will be published in The Impossible Shot. I always tell people, bring the finished work to the conferences, which is not what I did this year. Her research interests include Black cowboys, Black horror, post-colonial theory, and the Caribbean. So I think we'll start with Dr. Thomas.
Oh, okay. I thought we were starting.
Well, we could start depending on the program, but since you're sitting right here.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I will get started, but I have
okay.
to.
Well, let me give you a second.
Okay.
We're gonna start with. We'll start with Emily Burkett.
Is this on?
Yes, it should be.
Okay. So my paper is, I cut it way down because it was 20 pages, too much. But it's broken up into 3 sections, so I will sort of give a little nod to when I'm switching up the sections so it doesn't seem like we're getting lost. Okay. Since Jordan Peele first appeared in the sketch comedy show Key and Peele in 2012, he has been promoting conversation that contends with the racism that America has experienced since its inception and has so wrongly and self-righteously considered to be at an end. In the post-Obama era, so many expectations of a post-racist America were dashed. With the release of his acclaimed film Get Out in 2017, Peele addresses white liberalism, portraying so horrifically the commodification of Black bodies and what Peele calls the sunken place, which acts as a cinematic expression of Frantz Fanon's, quote, zone of non-being, an extraordinary sterile and arid region, an incline stripped bare of every essential from which a genuine new departure can emerge. In most cases, the Black man cannot take advantage of this descent into a veritable hell, end quote. As the country entered a state of wokeness, Peele released his sophomore film in 2019. Us attacks class struggle and the voices of the unheard, perhaps an homage to the subaltern of Gayatri Spivak, and Fanon's analysis of the rise of a moneyed bourgeoisie from amongst the colonized, who abandoned their tethered countrymen to sycophantically shadow the affluent colonizer. Through Nope, Peele modifies cinematic expectations. All at once, he offers a summer blockbuster, sci-fi, Western horror, Black cinema, buddy comedy, and social critique with a subtext that hints at Western colonialism and the slave trade. It is Peele's Black experience that makes this cinematic shift possible. He creates movies that not only reorder genres, but also alter the typical movie-going experience altogether. This trio of films expertly manifests post-colonial philosophies while simultaneously terrifying audiences with their adherence to the horror genre. I present a post-colonial and critical race-inflected reading of the film, asserting that the spaceship acts as a speculative version of the sailboat of the colonizer, with OJ and M acting as reimagined octathons intent on self-preservation and the destruction of the encroaching villain. I will comment on Peele's selection of BIPOC artists in his movies as an overarching and new interpretation of history and film. Peele introduces the potential of the Black hero, one who exists and has been formed in the world of oppression. The Haywood duo of OJ and M are relegated to roles that require extreme physical skill. However, through the denial of the coveted principal roles of Hollywood, OJ and M acquired the expertise necessary to face off with the alien invader. Peele utilizes speculative fiction to attack the dearth of African accounts of colonization. His art works in tandem with the writing of Christina Sharp. In her text, In the Wake, on Blackness and Being, Sharp commits to the unquestionable assertion that the effects of chattel slavery have not ceased to impact the lives of people of color, and says, Black people everywhere and anywhere we are still produce in, into, and through the wake an insistence on existing. We insist being Black into the wake. Peele too works in the wake, directly representing the aftermath of chattel slavery on his characters. Under the guise of a sci-fi summer blockbuster, he imagines with Nope the response of local native populations, shown here as OJ and M, to a terrifying predatory other, a Lovecraftian succubus intent on imprisoning all it can consume as cargo. The opening visual of the film is a rectangle mimicking the theater screen, intended to punctuate our obsession with the spectacle, reminding us of Peele's preoccupation with the potentiality of film. More directly, the audio of these introductory moments evokes terror, and once the alien captures multiple humans, we hear the groans of the prisoners. We are transferred to the bottom of the slave ship on the Middle Passage, complete with wind and howling of diminishing life and the constrained upward gaze of the ensnared captives staring into oblivion. So part one is Black in film. Historically likened to animals, Black humans have been treated as a commodity, stolen and shipped to colonial plantations to serve as free labor. The initial portrayal of Black people in film was done either by white men in blackface or white men in costumes that resembled primates. Enter the villain. The Black presence in film was intercepted by white artists. Ever the villain. The Black presence in film was intercepted by white artists to perpetuate Black stereotypes. Through Nope, Peele addresses the systemic Hollywood practice of denying Black artists the agency to tell their own history through cinema. He produces Black horror, a film genre that is not merely body horror, jump scares, alien attacks, etc., but rather Black horror is Black history, and part of Black horror and Black history is the neglect, oppression, and fundamental misuse of a population. Peele presents two contemporary characters, two new Black champions whose physical abilities and occupational talents are a byproduct of being shunned by white Hollywood. In Nope, Gordy the chimpanzee actor and star of Gordy's Home acts as a hybrid. He is simultaneously a symbol of Black stereotype in film, a racially coded monster, but also a representative of the former practice of using wild animals in cinema. While attempting to sell a horse, OJ and M meet in the office of Ricky Jupe Park, former child star of Gordy's Home, and the Western-inspired television show Kid Sheriff, where he earned the nickname he uses exclusively and serves as the title of his Wild West theme park. In this subplot, Jupe recalls the brutal attack of one of the chimps that played Gordy. He recounts the tragedy through a fictional Saturday Night Live skit with character actor Chris Kattan playing the chimpanzee. He says Kattan reacts and goes wild every time someone mentions the jungle. However, the chimpanzee was actually frightened by loud noises, the unexpected pops of his birthday balloons on the hot set lights. Coincidentally, during her safety meeting, M cautions everyone in the studio to refrain from making any loud noises when she and OJ are auditioning their horse. The chimp on the set of Gordy's Home is not maintained by a proper handler. It is a wild animal, and its potential violence has been left unattended, exploding on the soundstage at the pops of the balloons. The chimp brutalizes multiple actors on set before it is shot and killed as it curiously approaches young Jupe. The chimpanzees used for the sitcom have been removed from their natural habitat, imprisoned by a master, trained by a handler, their performance utilized and monetarily unrewarded, and then discarded when they are unable to work any longer. Allison calls Get Out horror verite, or truthful horror, because it uses the mechanics of the horror genre to expose actually existing racism, to render newly visible the very real, but often masked racial landscape of the professedly liberal post-racial America. Landsberg's assertions also can be applied to Nope. In the first 10 minutes of the film, Peele uses distinct elements of the horror genre, with the immediate audio of the film evoking the effect of fear. Nope begins with the audio of the fictional sitcom Gordy's Home. It is Gordy's birthday celebration, and we hear distant conversation between the mother and father, along with canned laughter. Next, Peele opens the visual of the film with a biblical reference, Nahum 3:6. I will pelt you with filth and treat you with contempt. I will make a spectacle of you. As the quotation resonates, the audio is filled with shrieks, the shouts of the chimpanzee, and the sound of someone being beaten. As it goes quiet, we hear the panting of a human. This scene fades into the sounds of a horse farm, generators, water spraying, horses braying and stamping, and in true horror film fashion, a radio announcing the search of 15 missing hikers. Peele introduces us to O.J. and his father, Otis Sr., who is reminding his son of the importance of the upcoming audition of their horses for a movie studio. The sound of a high-pitched shriek fills the soundscape with both actors looking to the sky. Otis Sr. slumps on his horse and then falls off. Next, O.J. is speeding in his truck with Otis Sr. spraying blood from an eye wound. Otis lies dead on a hospital table after a nickel falling from the sky is lodged in his brain. Peele cuts to the title sequence, a mostly blank screen with the same shrieking sound as before, along with fiercely blowing wind and rain. The screen squares off. We are in the belly of the beast, catching our last glimpse of Earth. Percussion reminiscent of war drums accompanies the screams. The claustrophobic square focuses on a rectangle resembling a theater screen that closes in on the Murray Bridge jockey film, which Peele reclaims and provides as a backstory because the jockey's name has long been forgotten. A direct focus is given to the Murray Bridge photos, a series of pictures taken by photographer Edward Muybridge used to prove that while running, a horse has all 4 feet off the ground. Later in the film, Peele casts O.J. and M as the direct descendants of this jockey. During a safety meeting on the set of a potential film, M explains the jockey was Bahamian, an obvious nod to colonial rule, and then he was the first jockey, animal wrangler, and person ever on film. Yet in reality, his identity has been erased. A white photographer has captured the abilities of a black horseman without assigning any credit to him. Not only does Peele cast a light on the lack of identity of black people in cinema since its inception, he also shows their misuse and removal. Peele rejects the contemporary practice of drawing heroes in the white superhero universe. There is nothing magical about O.J. or M, yet they remain extraordinary, and their blackness is what allows them to succeed. Black humans and animal actors have been uprooted and placed in an environment in which they act as servant, entertainer, and product for purchase. What Peele does with film is flip seemingly axiomatic narratives on the head. The alien is the white colonizer, and the heroes are capable minorities who have the strength and knowledge to win. In The Location of Culture, Homi Bhabha suggests there is no removal of the racism of colonialism from language, and it seems that Peele knowingly accepts this principle, utilizing the very medium denied so many black artists to showcase the prevalence of Hollywood racism. Jupe acts as an antagonist, so now I'll talk about the villains. Jupe acts as an antagonist. He follows in the footsteps of the chimpanzee mishandler on Gordy's home, attempting to harness a predatory animal in an attempt to accrue profit. Despite the tragedy Jupe experienced with a wild animal as a child, he attempts to engage in a relationship with the animal that has been visiting Jupiter's claim for 6 months. As a successful capitalist, in order to share the experience with others for a fee, he offers the alien a horse to consume, hoping to keep it in the area and returning to the park to feed. Jupe was indoctrinated into this spectacle and will do anything to recapture his celebrity. The alien is not satiated by the occasional horse, so it begins to consume more, including the 15 hikers referenced in the beginning of the film. The initial showcase of the Star Lasso experience goes horrifically wrong. Meanwhile, Em is at the ranch watching the Murray Bridge tapes, and suddenly the alien is above the house, expelling everything it does not want of the victims it has ingested. It has no problem swallowing whole all it wants, digesting what it finds useful, and expelling the rest. Later, the alien attempts to capture Em, who is in the house. It uses its vortex and rips the roof off the ranch, throwing Em through the air. As she lands, she is showered by her father's record collection. The alien has no need for the obscure black music Em and her family enjoys. It is another disposable item and a comment on the countless musicians lost from historical memory. The alien is a shapeshifter. It consumes and then disappears, returning when the necessity for abduction calls. Near the end of the film, Peele offers 2 new forms of the alien. With their plans unraveling and the remaining 3 characters trying to stay alive, Peele decides to alter the alien's shape. After the alien attempts to eat Angel, it morphs into something new. There is a perfect side view with O.J. riding Lucky backwards, the alien now loosely flowing like the billowing sails of a ship. Was a slave ship not an alien invader that had abducted and raped onlookers, only to shove them into catastrophic quarters, resounding with the desperate wails of the abductees? As O.J. and M each work to tempt the alien, we see a close-up of multiple square-shaped bursts. These squares resemble a camera capturing the last shots of O.J. and M before it sucks them into the void, leaving nothing behind aside from the utter destruction and no one to recount or document the lived experience of the subjugated and consumed. As M sets to Jupiter's claim the Jupiter's claim balloon loose, the alien shapeshifts again. As it ascends to the sky, it takes the shape of a robed figure with a large monarchical headpiece, reminiscent of papal garb. The sailboat and the cloak are symbols of colonization. These forms are purposeful and act as oppressive and dangerous reflections of the European absolutism of the past. How many indigenous Africans sacrificed themselves to save loved ones? How many men and women fought back? Those voices have been erased forever, replaced with the narration of the colonizer, which has taken as unquestionable truth. As Peele reimagines the Black hero, he takes into account the reality of the Black experience, but reminds audiences that the known and taught history of people of color has been created without the consent of the protagonists. The Black hero. In Nope, Peele presents a new Black hero. It is through Blackness, past oppression, and lack of employment mobility, that OJ and M are able to defeat the monster. Peele draws real heroes, ones who could not defeat this alien without going through the same racially pervasive experiences as their ancestors. This new hero uses the perceived weaknesses that others have instilled into their very psyche to guard themselves against attack. Once again, Peele enlists Black composer Michael Abels to provide the soundtrack for Nope, previously working with Abels on Get Out and Us. Abels uses Black musical artists to clarify situational commonalities between OJ and M and Black voices of the past. OJ and M are able to defeat the monster in tandem because of the jobs they have been relegated to them: cowboy, handler, stuntwoman, etc. In Cowboy Cool, a professional Black cowboy's perspective, Maisha C. Babers presents historical data about American cowboys, highlighting the complicated existence of Black cowboys in mid-19th century Mexico and Texas. Peele wastes no time proving the validity of the accomplished Black cowboys. While audiences might feel a sense of unease or disbelief that Otis Sr. and OJ are capable horsemen, Peele's lack of acknowledgement reminds viewers of the near-complete removal of the historical presence of Black cowboys. This notion is supported by the absence of any Black figures at Jupiter's claim. Peele showcases the existence of these Black horsemen and allows the physical abilities and training talents of Otis Sr. and OJ to speak to their validity as proud ancestors of Black Western equine experts. To others in the film, animals are considered disposable. Shoot the chimp, feed the horse to the alien, use the horses as bait. But to OJ, they are something more. The horses are part of his family's legacy. They are something that only the Haywoods can truly master, understand, and access. The film has beautifully tender moments between siblings who are going through the death of their patriarch, potential closure and sale of their family business, and working multiple jobs to get by. OJ remains stoic throughout, committed to keeping his father's ranch open and bolstering his legacy because it, quote, means something. Pops did something here. He changed the industry. During a moment of reminiscence, This Is the Lost Generation by The Lost Generation plays in the background on a turntable. The song details the realities of generations of Black Americans who struggle with the inherited mentality of their forebears. Despite the pessimism of his reality, OJ is committed to keeping the ranch in operation. OJ discovers the alien will not attack if you do not look it in its eyes. By bowing his head, OJ is able to send the predator on its way. He makes a similar comment in the beginning of the film concerning the horses and avoiding eye contact so as not to startle the horse. This could be read as proper handling, but it also parallels alpha dominance. Keeping a lowered head is a sign of submission. OJ stays alive in several situations because he submits to this dominant creature. OJ and M harness talent born from rejection and the need to make themselves multifaceted. Both characters are extremely adaptive. After the catastrophe on the film set, OJ works to create a mirror ball used in filmmaking for visual effects in order to train his horses to be accustomed to them when they are used on set. Because he has not listened to on the film set, he knows that he must accommodate his training methods to incorporate staple visual effects accoutrement in order to continue working. In the background plays Fisherman by the Congos, a Jamaican reggae band popular in the 70s. The song is a reminder to all fishermen to continue rowing their boats and catching their fish. With its Christian undertones, the song expresses perseverance, typical of artists facing the realistic predicaments of their lives, the perfect accompaniment to OJ's continued attempts to maintain the family business. Abels chooses Exuma, the Obeah Man, performed by Exuma, as a catalyst for the montage of the four characters preparing to capture a film of the alien. The song depicts the power of an Obeah sorcerer who can, among other magical practices, bring people back from the dead. The song recalls the Junkanoo celebrations of Caribbean slaves. While the song expresses the magical potential of the practice of Obeah, a form of spell casting and healing that was banned in the Caribbean by terrified colonists, it acts as an accompaniment to the incitement of the abilities of OJM and their teammate Angel and the courage they are about to elicit. Abels aptly uses the song to prepare the audience for the encroaching spectacle. Peele utilizes a forgotten song in African traditions, rooted in African traditions, that have been stifled by colonial governments through banning, with the only removal of the ban by the Jamaican and Bahamian governments due to the potential acceptance of the festival as a tourist attraction akin to Carnival or Mardi Gras, another appropriated, remade, and commodified celebration of the African diaspora. The inclusion of the song is purposeful as it serves as historical evidence of one Black artist telling the story of his own culture. In the following scene, OJM, Angel, and famed cinematographer Antlers Holst work to catch the impossible shot. They trick the alien into following OJ, expertly controlling his horse Lucky, and capture the alien on film. We must not forget OJ's caliber. Without his knowledge and experience with horses, the would-be filmmakers would never be able to capture the kind of footage they hope to get. He also knows about animals, particularly predators, and how to behave in a symbiotic relationship with one. His knowledge is important. It is based on generations of Black horsemanship, a skill that was overlooked and dismissed at the beginning of the film. OJ stays alive in several situations because he submits to the aggressive creature, and we must not forget the electrical outages caused by the presence of the alien, furthering the necessity of OJ's prowess. After Holst is taken, the alien begins to consume everything. OJ and M know one of them is about to be taken. They lock eyes, and the siblings each try to entice the alien. After several moments of the monster watching a submissive OJ, he looks straight at it, confronting the alpha, refusing to stand down. He is sacrificing himself for his sister. However, Emma tracks it by yelling, and it follows her speeding away on a dirt bike to Jupiter's Claim and races through the theme park, ending the ride in an expertly executed power slide. M is a jack of all trades. She has to be in order to survive in an industry that has neither recognized nor appreciated her abilities. She astutely cuts the Jupiter's Claim balloon loose and snaps a picture of the alien eating it before it explodes from ingesting the helium. She gets the incredible shot, the shot that no one else has, as OJ says, "What we're about to do, they can't erase that." Photography and film create lasting evidence, but if the people who make it are not remembered and considered insignificant, then they are lost. In his acclaimed essay, Monster Culture: 7 Theses, Jeffrey Jerome Cohen explains what the monstrous entails. There was always something more to the monster. It is a reflection of our culture. It is the other. It is what we don't understand about ourselves. Through the horror genre, Jordan Peele utilizes minority groups who have been othered and considered monstrous. Through his films, he attacks the historical monstering of these groups by painting a platform to showcase the horrors of their treatment, while simultaneously providing them with the honest abilities needed to defeat the true monster in the film, humanity. He attacks filmmaking with a responsibility to create stories that represent historical crimes and include the voices of oppressed groups. Peele paints characters who simultaneously actively work within and against a system of oppression and exploitation. OJ and M have grown accustomed to rejection, modifying their talents, exploring multiple avenues of inclusion, and adding myriad specializations to their resumes. The siblings stoically accept the distance that is growing between them and Hollywood, but make every effort to continue making a living in the industry in which they were brought up. Through diligence, they sharpen their expertise, becoming the only heroes able to defeat the alien colonizer. As Fanon suggests, Nope must incorporate colonial influences because they are inescapable. The film conveys the effects of colonialism on Black people in general, but more specifically Black filmmaking. The film is a defense against white Hollywood and works to nod at the effects of colonialisms, uncover the oppression of white Hollywood, show the abilities gained by Black artists in OJ&M because of this oppression, and through their defeat of the alien, create a film that is a direct hit against all systematic oppression. It is Peele's statement that he is done playing by any previously established rules. And it is the experiences of Africans and Black Americans that lend to the creation of such layered films. Peele does not just make something new, he explodes the past, reduces the systemic supremacy represented in Hollywood to rubble in order to build fresh films in its wake, movies that speak to generations of Americans who have grown up voiceless and refuse to go unheard. His films serve as a social comment on the atrocities that have been committed by whites against people of color and the complete denial of Black authorship of the past. So far, all of Peele's films are a testament to the historic lack of Black agency. Thank you.
Thank you. So next we'll have Mabalia Thomas. Oops, timer. You were right on time.
All right. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, sorry, I'm Southern. I can't help myself. All right.
So I'm Imbalia, and I go by Imbalia, not Dr. Thomas, unless you're nasty. And here is my work in progress, Jay-Z's lyrical monstrosity and the 2010 Gothic single, Monster. In his seminal book chapter, Monster Culture, which has been cited many times so far, Jeffrey Cohen offers up 7 theses towards understanding cultures through the monsters they bear. Firstly, he writes, the monstrous body is pure culture, a construct and a projection to be read. Like a letter on the page, the monster signifies something other than itself. It is always a displacement, always inhabits the gap between the time of upheaval that created it and the moment into which it is received, to be born again. Secondly, the monster always escapes, eventually to return, perhaps in some shifted form. Thirdly, the monster is the harbinger of category crises, demanding a radical rethinking of boundary and normality. Fourthly, the monster is difference, cultural, political, racial, economic, sexual, made flesh, come to dwell among us. Fifthly, the monster polices the borders of the possible, outing the transgressors through transformation into monstrous difference, while sixthly, marking our fear as a kind of desire. Lastly, Cohen posits the monster stands at the threshold of becoming, asking why we have created them. Cohen's writing makes me think anew about an old song, Kanye West's 2010 hit track, Monster. The song appears as the 6th track on West's 5th studio album, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. Produced in the wake of West's altercation with Taylor Swift at the 2009 Video Music Awards, the album is filled with reflections on life and loss of fame. The song itself is said to be an allegory about the music industry and the ways in which the industry draws out the base monstrosity of behavior and deeds in artists and in their artistry as these individuals attempt to navigate the field's financial rewards, excesses, and competition. This critique might be read through the song's repeating chorus of gossip, gossip, and profit, profit, which are woven across the track. In all, Monster is a 6-minute, 18-second track that is stitched together by a patchwork of verses by several artists, one of whom is the hip-hop artist and mogul Jay-Z. While the entire song warrants analysis, I will focus today's presentation on Jay-Z's 30-second performance, a performance I feel is underrated. My goal in this presentation is to share a work in progress that has a threefold aim. 1, to highlight the way lyrics and music come together to paint a neo-Victorian picture of man-made, or music industry-made, monstrosity, and give it emotional life. 2, to demonstrate the poesis by which Jay-Z's verses give life to Gothic monstrosity by geographically and temporally transporting his monstrous alter ego through time and by collapsing time, while repetitive speech sounds and deviating rhymes and rhythms, or beats, attempt to animate, pardon, and ultimately justify Jay-Z's artistically inhuman or inhumane behavior. And third, to show that Jay-Z accomplishes this lyrical feat all while maintaining a thematic life on the streets and musical fidelity to the rap genre. Methodologically, I work to accomplish this task using a multimodal stylistic analysis, an analytical tool that lives in the interstices of linguistics, stylistics, narrative analysis, and musical analysis. Monster opens with heavily auto-tuned lyrics by indie band Bon Iver's Justin Vernon, the one white member of the track's posse, hiding out, mind you, and rhetorically asking, "Are you willing to sacrifice your life?" Vernon's question is followed by a Wilhelm scream and a lion's roar, sounds that provide a transition to the darkly borders of rap monstrosity as hip-hop artist Rick Ross announces his presence with, "Bitch, I'm a monster, no good bloodsucker." These lines are delivered over a backing drum track, a track that is continuous across the song. The backing drum is accompanied by other sounds, including a metallic horn bumping, what I call an oinking sound, which is periodically interrupted by additional screams and roars, pauses and silences, all of which are reinforced and connected by repetition of the chorus, which is only uttered by Kanye West. The continuous beat provides both a sense of movement and cohesion to the song. While the beats and sound effects repeat, they do so with difference. These deviations foreground shifts between artists and their musical contributions, marking each artist's narrative territory musically. These narrative territories, or verses, belong to West, Jay-Z, and Minaj, respectively, resulting in a musical production of a Gothic trilogy of first-person narrative retellings. Through these retellings, the artists recycle and restory Victorian tales of monstrous dualism as they dialogically engage with their public and monstrous selves across urban/musical landscapes, lamenting modern capitalism and grotesque competition, and where the spectral form is money. I'll now take you briefly into the storyscapes of West and Minaj before unpacking the narrative territory belonging to Jay-Z. West's retelling calls to mind the moral monstrosity of Oscar Wilde's Dorian Gray. Like Gray, the italicized themes of vanity, excess, privilege, masking, quote, fucking up my money, so yeah, I had to act sane, are key to West's dark persona, as is the misogyny which is suggested by the lyrical disposability of the women in the song. They are just number one and number two, and the propensity to make godlike juvenile commands, just stop it, from the chorus, and less talk, more head, and kiss my ass. In fact, I'm sorry, I have to curse. I feel like, I can't believe I'm apologizing, but I'm not used to saying all of this in public space. Anyway, in fact, one has to wonder if profit, spelled P-R-O-F-I-T from the introductory chorus, isn't really a play on the words prophet, P-R-O-P-H-E-T, especially in light of the imperative request to see your fucking hands. Whereas a portrait reveals the dark side of Dorian Gray's superficial beauty, West's words are the window to his beautiful, dark, twisted, monstrous soul. His verses are simple in their rhyme. There's lots of straightforward repetition, ha-ha, prophet, prophet, shit, shit. But then within the structure of these rhymes, he lyrically pushes the boundaries of narration by forcing words and meaning into service of his artistry, rhyming main and pain, sane and accent, sarcophagus and esophagus, and delivering lines like head of the class and she just won a swallowship. Through manipulations of speed, vocal position, assonance, and creatively juvenile plays on words, West creates an uncanny tension for the listener as they stand at the threshold to see how he will resolve his rhymes. Minaj offers a narrative retelling of Gothic monstrosity and a sonic portrayal of monstrous transformation. Her retelling recycles and restores Stevenson's strange case of the double, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, but through a feminine lens. Across her narrative territory, Minaj signals the feminine, the monster do, Giuseppe heel, the monster shoe. She further genders the text with body parts, titties, thick ass, girly voices, represented by the italicized portions of the text on screen, and girly accoutrements, Barbie and pink wig. Yet this femininity hides a monstrous duality that is stylistically crafted by lyrical parallelism of contrasting feminine, read soft, and masculine, read hard, lexical forms. She pulls up in the monster automobile in gangsta fashion with a bad bitch from Sri Lanka, and if you'd like, you could be the king, but watch the queen conquer. The duality surfaces as Minaj ventriloquizes and dialogically responds to industry critique through the girly voices, let me get this straight, wait, I'm the rookie, but really, I don't give a F-U-C-K. Forget Barbie, fuck Nikki, because she's fake. And the duality is added by the lyrical rhyming scheme, which draws on in-rhyming of strong and weak syllables, gangsta, Sri Lanka, Wonka and Kanka, and clever word plays. She's on a diet, but her pocket's eating cheesecake. However, threat of an impending transformation, a collapse in the boundary separating the monster and the feminine rapper, is suggested at the multiple intersections of money, fame, and professional recognition, such as, "First things first, I'll eat your brains," she warns, rocking gold teeth and fangs, or all up in the bank with a funny face. Just killed another career, it's a mild day. Finally, the sonic landscape of this monstrous transformation is notable for the complexity of voices that Minaj draws upon, from the American, British, and Caribbean accents and acceptable girly voices to the more masculine, hard voices to the more monstrous voice that trills, shakes, and transforms, like poor Dr. Jekyll with a growling roar, "This is what you live for," declaring, "I'm a fucking monster." Bookmarked between Kanye West and Nicki Minaj are Jay-Z's 5 lyrical verses. Jay-Z's retelling draws upon repetition and deviation to restore a Frankensteinian tale of Gothic monstrosity. The narration unfolds across a 3-narrator story structure reminiscent of a Gothic tale, featuring a narrator, "What do these things all have in common?" A monster, "I rape and pillage a village," and a creator, "These niggas I made millionaires." Jay-Z creates a tale of remembrance marked by wretched regret, man-made tyranny, and the search for compassion across geographical, temporal, and mental landscapes as he physically, psychologically, and sonically embodies the roles of narrator, monster, and creator as he senses, breathes, perceives, smells, and sees, remembers, "I still hear fiends scream in my dreams," feels, "Love, I don't get enough of it," and moves across blocks through convertibles across the geographical, temporal, and vernacular landscape, all while a backing beat of sounds animate, attempt to pardon, and ultimately justify his artistically inhuman behavior. Like Shelley's classic, Jay-Z's tale begins with Jay-Z the narrator's sighting of the monster through an enumeration of monsters from modern-day monsters, Sasquatch, Godzilla, King Kong, to the more Gothic varieties, Loch Ness, goblin, ghoul, zombie. From there, he turns to riddling, a kind of rhetorical questioning associated with rap music in the African-American genre of signifying, asking, question, what do these things all have in common? Arguably, it's a rather classic move by an old-school rapper, as the rhetorical question implies a known answer. Everybody knows I'm a motherfucking monster, he says. Through this didactic shift from the them monsters to him the monster, Ima, Jay-Z draws himself into the narrative structure of the song, and in doing so, plays off a duality that is also at the heart of Shelley's novel. Who is the real monster, the creator or his daemon? With this pronouncement underscored by musical silence, Jay-Z the monster takes over. He narrates us across uncanny acts of Gothic monstrosity, conquer, stomp, stop, scream, lyrical negation, denial, disbelief, and nonsense and none, and objects and places associated with such monstrosity, niggas, swamp, carnage, fiends, and dreams. These items are foregrounded sonically through phonological repetition of the internal vowel sounds, affected partly by Jay-Z's Brooklyn-infected pronunciation, as well as combinations of repetitions and deviations that mark the tenuously rhyming couplet of each line. Such repetition with deviation is carried across the first 3 lines as the repeated forms of nonsense, with their slightly different and ambiguous meanings, and none stretch from the end of one line to be picked up by the next line of verse. Repetition and deviation also foreshadow and introduce narrative temporal disjunctions, where the first 2 lines start off in the present tense, conquer, stomp ya, stop, and know, but the 3rd line shifts to the present perfect tense, have seen and I've seen, a shift suggestive of narration in the historical present. Moreover, this line, which is delivered at the sonic level of a whisper, introduces a perceptual or psychological shift that aids the temporal and personal shift from you know to I've seen to I still hear and my dreams in ways that suggest a very personal and up close and lived experience. With this temporal and perceptual shift, aided by a shift in the beat, Jay-Z the Creature takes us into some undefined period in his past through memory. This is a time of monstrous activities: murder, kill, rape, pillage, and dark images, black convertibles and avenues, linked together with slightly repeating in rhymes and internal rhymes. The aliveness of this remembering monster is reflected grammatically in the aspirated, the drawing of breath, twice repeated sentence initial use of the subject pronoun I, as well as through the very active and yet metaphorical activities of kill a block and murder the avenues, rape and pillage a village, women and children, constructed through concealed repetition with minimal pairs, pillage and village, as the creature marks his deadly path across the urban terrain. The verses close with another deictic shift prompted by the pronoun everybody, away from the past or memory to a physical or psychological state, wanna know, as Jay-Z the Creature invites us to consider his humanity, what my Achilles heel is. With the introduction of this fourth verse, there is a shift in the beat. It's stripped back to only get the one focal drum beat. This drum beat, like a beating heart, accompanies a lyrical shift in perspective and in time back to the present. Though no emotion in the words themselves, yet there is a whispering, almost aspirated aspect to Jay-Z's vocal delivery as he utters a semantically ambiguous lament, love, with a whispered dramatic effect, pause, and drawn-on pronunciation that's almost sung. Arguably, this shift and contrast might be viewed as the psychological shift to the third or creator narrator. He contrasts this, I don't get enough of it, with the next lines, all I get. These two lines featuring non-rhyming ends but phonological rhymes of get, it, get across the first two lines of the verse. Then there's the word initial with deviation rhyming with all I get, all I see, again picking up this narrative stylistic style of delivery that features internal repetition where there is no in repetition and repetition across lines. Millionaires, air, and milling and spilling. There's also more redundancy, semantic redundancy between vampires and bloodsuckers, niggas and millionaires, milling, spilling. Okay, I'll stop with the linguistic bits, and I will skip on and say this verse is a lament of sorts, one riddled with allusions to other monsters. Arguably, this verse can be seen as a thinly veiled criticism of rappers of that period, like Meek Mill and his Millie Rock dance with Milling About, and Drake, who is known for singing about feelings, spilling their feelings in the air. Yes, okay. Thanks. It's a little long, so I can come back with questions. I appreciate that, though. Literal shout out. The fifth and final verse is introduced by a return to the oinking sound of the second verse, which originally introduced the narrative beginning of the monster story. This intertextual musical underpinning of the line, all I see is these fake fucks with no fangs, seems to drag us through time and space as the audible and deep intake of breath, followed by the aspirated release of I smell a massacre, suggests a psychological shift and reemergence of the beast. The verse ends with the winding down of the music, almost like a musical death and ending in silence, as Jay-Z utters, seems to be the only way to back you bastards up. While there is so much more for me to analyze about this song, my hope is that initially I have shown that Jay-Z's monstrous self is stylistically, lyrically, and musically different from that of Kanye's and Nicki's. that Jay-Z is an old school monstrosity, just as Jay-Z himself is an old school rapper. He uses sound, imagery, generic structure or genre structure, and meaning, all of which come together to musical-linguistically create a psychological and ideological point of view that's neo-Victorian monstrosity. Drawing on shifts in grammatical tense, Jay-Z depicts a creature that is almost timeless, or who at the least crosses temporal borders, but who is also uncannily a reflection of monstrous humanity. Through his sonic performance, we see a monster who is living, breathing, but has, at least a desire for, human emotions, but is also metaphorically dead, his ice-cold veins. The monster who, quote, smells a massacre. Breath plays such a key role in this piece, not only in terms of punctuating and keeping time with the beat, but also in narratively creating, giving voice to, and depicting the realness of the monster. I think I'll stop there. Thank you.
Excellent. That was actually like perfectly on time. I decided, even with only having 2 panelists, to still keep to 20 minutes so we have time for some really robust conversation. I have my own questions for each of you, and then we will open it up. One of the threads that I felt like running through both was kind of the idea of prowess and skill, right? The way that in Nope, what was his name? OJ. How did I forget that? OJ and M used the prowess and skill that they have been able to develop through kind of their like forms of exploitation and exclusion to defeat the monster. And then one of the things I see happening in the rap lyrics is monstrosity also as like an analogy for prowess and skill, right? So yeah, I just wondered if maybe each of you, for you, Emily, I'm thinking about this idea of the Black hero, and I'm wondering if maybe we could think and talk about how the Black hero innovates the hero, not only through inserting a Black man into the hero role, but about how he might be innovating Black masculinity. Like you talked about him submitting to the monster, like using that as a form of survival. So how can we think about the Black hero as innovating the idea of the hero, right? Not just theorizing it as its own thing, but how does the Black hero sort of innovate the idea of the hero in terms of the masculine hero? Mm-hmm. And I just wondered if maybe, Mabalia, you could speak a little bit to like superior skill, superior prowess as like an analogy for monstrosity, at the same time as these artists are also very conscious of being perceived as monsters and being willing to embrace that position. So, just if each of you, or whatever you want to talk about, if you didn't get my questions, but those are some things I was thinking about.
So just to talk about the innovation of the Black hero, or sort of placing, sorry, brain fart, go.
Yeah.
I guess I'll say, in terms of the song Monster and the 3 rappers representing skill and prowess, I'm not even sure I look at it that way. I mean, I realize all 3 of them are reflecting on their skill and prowess, but I feel like the piece is really more a conversation about just the way in which situations make you move beyond your skill and prowess, for reasons that almost have little to do with you and more about the environment in which you find yourself. And so I think this notion of the terrain and territory really shapes how we begin to think about the skills that people have and how they might come forward in times of need. So with Jay-Z, I think I think his prowess is just taken for granted because it just surfaces in the lyrics in such really creative and smooth ways, but that the reflection is really about the humanity of the individual and how the context can twist and fold the ways in which we engage in spaces as human beings. And we engage in monstrous ways that have nothing to do with our creativity.
So thinking back to Nope and parts of it, just where there's a scene where M is in the commercial tryout or the film tryout, and she starts just sort of listing off the litany of things that she's able to do, and those are what make her the able hero. So I would say that the concept of just someone that has been, I think Peele is trying to say that people that have been sort of marginalized, oppressed, and unable to access what allows them to be talented, agentic beings is allowing them now in the film itself, and I think in other films that we've seen, Get Out and Us as well, that these characters are able to overcome whatever situation they're in alone, or not alone, but because of the marginalization. And the moment that really made me think of this was when OJ's on the horse, and I like the fact that this alien creates this space where no electrical, there's no electricity at all. OJ would be the only one that is able to do this. He would be the only one that is able to draw the alien towards him and entice it into a spot where it can be filmed. And so I think that the lack of contemporary Black cowboy stories has taken, it's like a huge hit to Black history, especially Black masculinity. And like you said, that being able to be a hero, just like, and step back and say that at this moment I have to be the one that puts my head down, and it doesn't have to be, a Black hero, it could be any hero. And I mean, we're kind of seeing a little bit of that right now with a lot of, well, I'm not getting political, never mind.
No, I mean, that's one of the things that I've been thinking about as we theorize these, like, Black expressions of these common tropes in horror, science fiction, fantasy, is I really would like to see us not only kind of forming our own little, like, parallel ideas, but understanding the way that Black innovations and Black experience can innovate those ideas. Like, the hero has to learn how to put his head down sometimes, and that can be useful for any kind of, like, heroic figure. And I think that's something your paper was getting at, so let's, I want to open it up. And one of the things we could speak to in the questions is also questions about, maybe the parts of the paper or the analysis that they didn't share, right? Since we have a little bit of time.
Who'd like to go first? I've got a microphone here. Great, Asa.
Hi, thanks so much. They're both very interesting. You talked a little bit about the specific, about the fact that the monsters that come up in that initial verse are sort of classic monsters. But I'm wondering if you see any rationale behind the specific ones picked. Sasquatch as the first one seems so you got like classic cinematic monsters, but Sasquatch is something else, and so I'm just wondering if you've thought about why those and why that order in particular.
Right. I did, and I have, and I decided to drop it, but one of the ways I was looking at it was that you have I think I was thinking of human monsters, or the kinds of monsters that people tend to think of as human monsters, and then you have kind of the non-human, the non-conscious kinds of monsters. And then I thought, well, maybe it's not as simple as that. Maybe it's more complex. It's like monsters that maybe the younger audience might think about, or different. So I think it's maybe an issue of genre. I haven't decided yet, and I think it's worth kind of exploring a little bit more. But I just haven't landed on it. So I call them classic and like older, like more gothic type of monsters, because it felt like a division that could work for now. But kind of. And I think I said kind of, but so yeah. Thanks for that question.
Yes, okay, I'm coming.
Thank you so much. And I'll thank also the prior questioner for a wonderful opening. I also have a question about the selection of monsters in the spectacular analysis of like Jay-Z's lyricism. I'm really intrigued by the selection of Victorian parallels. And one thing that I noticed that I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to, the two Victorian creatures who are evoked in Kanye West's and Nicki Minaj's lyrics, Wilde's Dorian Gray and Stevenson's Jekyll and Hyde, I think are a really interesting duo because they happen to have the same origin in some sense. Wilde was very heavily inspired, you probably know, by the work of John Addington Symonds, a scholar of antiquity, in his defense of his own homosexuality during his sodomy trial. And John Addington Symonds was also the inspiration for Robert Louis Stevenson's Jekyll and Hyde. And I'm wondering if sort of the queerness of that maybe lurks also in Jay-Z as well, especially the line Achilles' heel seems incredibly key to me because Achilles is one of those classical figures who lurks at the bottom of Symonds' arguments for an idea of sort of a more equal type of like homosexual relationship. So I was wondering if you could maybe speak to some of that. Thank you.
Yes, I wish I could. I hadn't thought about the text in that way. I hadn't thought about the text in that way, and that gives me something to kind of think about. And I should just preface this by saying that, I'm very new to this field, and so this is my attempt at really making sense of the things that I would think typically talk about in some of the readings that I think are very relevant to the field. So I'm gonna just sit with that question instead of just making something on the spot, and say thank you for that question. It gives me something to think about.
Terrific, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. Hi, my name is Kay, and I'm a English PhD candidate at Stanford, and my question is for Mbalia. I'm wondering how you've been wrestling with how discussion of monstrosity relates to discourse around rap artists, especially male rap artists. Mm-hmm. Thinking currently what's happening with Diddy and also allegations around Jay-Z. I'm thinking about specifically the line "I rape and pillage," mm-hmm. And how there's a facetiousness of playing into these stereotypes of black men as monstrous rapists, but at the same time, there's also more visibility being given to the predatory behavior of black male rap artists as well. Yeah, so I was just wondering if you'd be able to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I would. I would say partly because I'm from Atlanta and I've been following the RICO trials of some of the rap artists whose musical lyrics have been held against them. Mm-hmm. I typically don't hold artists, I don't hold the lyrics against an artist. I see it as an art form. I see it as a place for creativity. It's drawing on language in ways that people understand. It doesn't mean that I completely separate the artist from what they say and what they do, but as a work of art, I take that as something very separate, and I look for it in terms of what it does with language. That's probably one of the drawbacks of being an applied linguist, is that I can separate mm-hmm. the language from what it may mean out in the field of play. So yeah, I take rape, pillage, and village as just purely drawing from the fabric of human language for the sounds that it creates and that mm-hmm. movement and motion that just kind of, stems from some of the artists. And one of the things that I've been reading about Jay-Z is that he does not write his lyrics down. He's just not sitting there planning it like you would think a poet would do. He's just relying on this intuitive sense of language and its flow to create a text, and I think that's brilliant. Even if I sit and think, well, now those are some crazy lyrics, but in terms of just the artistry, I can really appreciate that separately.
Casey. Vicky?
Excellent papers. Thank you all for presenting them. It's on two things that I love, hip hop and horror films, particularly black horror films. But I had this question for Emily Burkett, and I was wondering, I think at some point in your talk you said that the ship gets rid of things that is not useful, right? And mm-hmm. so part of what's not useful is obviously black bodies and money. So is there any connection that you see between the non-usefulness of the black body and money?
I don't know if it does get rid of black bodies. I would, the things that I remember it pouring out were like the wheelchair of the character from Gordy's home, and money, and the records specifically. I remember them smashing and crashing. Go ahead.
That's why I meant to say records, I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, definitely, because I think that Peele's use of Abel's, again, on his films, the wealth of knowledge, musical knowledge that he has, and bringing in some more obscure artists, I think Peele is definitely, that's purposeful. And the fact that music is played primarily on the turntable at the home in multiple moments, I think that he's definitely calling attention to the use of and unacknowledgement of Black musicians, and then how it was just sort of dumped back out when it was done being used. Because if you think about these more obscure artists, they're not the ones that have been played frequently and then sort of reincorporated into popular music or popular films. So I think he's trying to show something with that.
Great. Carla, did you have?
Thank you. Thanks. I thought both of these papers were really fantastic. And when Jalondra raised the question of innovation, it made me think about Nope. And one of the things that I always found so brilliant about that film is that the other than humans don't act simply as symbolic, but authentic affiliations are established between, for example, the animal being of the chimpanzee, or the horse being of the horses, or the alien being of the alien. And so in terms of something I don't see in normative horror filmmaking, there is this kind of active affiliation, a conferring of subjectivity and an alliance with what is not human in the film. And I thought that was really something new and brilliant in Peele's filmmaking. So I just wanted to make that comment. And also, Mbalia, when you said you treat the text as its own poetic object, what I kept thinking is one of the things you made really clear is there's a shift in personas in each verse, and it makes a difference which persona is uttering which thing, right? When the monster's speaking versus the I commentator on, yeah. So thank you both. This was great.
Okay, I think, Amy, did you have your hand up?
There was one behind.
Oh, you're next.
Hi, thank you all so much for these rich analyses. My question is for you, Emily, about the non-Black characters of color in Nope, right? So we have Jupe and we have Angel. And I was really struck by, the Gordy TV show. It seems like, because you had referred to Jupe as indoctrinated, right? And I was thinking about the intentionality of Peele having what looked like a transracially adopted white family, which it could have been an Asian, like a fully Asian American family, and the history of transracial adoption and a kind of indoctrination with adoptees of color, adopted people of color. So that was really interesting to me. So I'm curious what your analysis of these, like a little, because I was thinking with Jupe, this idea of the model minority and how that relates to anti-Blackness and the fact that he couldn't even speak about his trauma, which I think is a diasporic condition, right? And he could only speak like third hand about the SNL sketch, right? So if you had anything more to say about Angel as a potentially like an ally character, and Jupe as well as these non-Black characters of color.
Jupe, I do talk about Jupe in the paper, but I kind of went over it really quickly because of time. But what I noticed with Jupe is he's in this spaghetti Western outfit. He has a white wife, and the children are in masks, and you don't even really see the children, so you can't really, perceive what they look like. And the whole of the Jupiter's Claim, which was originally, I can't remember what it was called before, but it was like a Western style theme park, but it's been completely whitewashed. There is not a single person of color represented in any of the background decorations of the park. So for him, I see as almost like where in Us, where there are these tethered characters, I think that Jupe is almost sort of like one of those where he's just attempting to maintain this white bourgeois lifestyle and not caring about the effects that it has on anyone else, and literally is sacrificing without worry, and has his wife calling people to come and film it. She's on the phone at one point calling to have them come and have film come to try to catch this alien on film, which is exactly what the Hayward twins are doing as well. They're trying to get this impossible shot. But yeah, I think he acts sort of as like another character that's been indoctrinated into this idea of this perfection of whiteness. As far as Angel is concerned, the only really thing I thought about for him was there's this moment in the end where he uses the tarp and barbed wire to save himself. And what struck me was that during all of the encampments of Latinos and Latinas coming up from Central and South America, you see these tarps being used to act as shelter, and of course the barbed wire of this wall that's being built. And so that kind of struck me as the way for him to save himself is to wrap himself with these symbols of sort of othering and staying here.
Yeah, I think there's something interesting in all those characters and like differential relationships to power that we can read outside of, not outside of, but like nuance the kind of black, non-black binary, right? Like, I wouldn't, well, we'll talk later. Okay, there's a question.
Hi, thank you so much for this panel. It's really getting a lot of gears going, so hopefully this question will make sense. I've been thinking a lot about how Monster itself is a bit of a moving target.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I was struck with Jay-Z and Nicki Minaj and Kanye's lyrics is this embedded heavy critique of the entertainment industry and the music industry itself, which is part of sort of a larger hip-hop narrative. And so I'm wondering if Monster Studies is a mechanism to sort of parcel out a bit with these lyrics that, like, you think that I'm the monster and that these things are the monster and that hip-hop is sexually explicit and all of these things, but really what's going on is that the monster is over here in sort of these larger institutional frameworks that they have to be in, but at the same time, it's like there's all this bullshit that's, now I'm cursing, there's all this bullshit, right? So, yeah, I'm just curious about what your thoughts are in that, and if you see that as sort of a part of the monster theory frameworks working in that way.
Right. I would say that, this conference is what made me really want to bring this paper to life. So I think the theories really help you think deeply about things that you are already thinking about in very specific ways. And I would say that rather than the critique, there is definitely a critique about the music industry, and I don't think it's that the music industry is acting monstrous, but that the music industry is really making people act monstrous. And the reason I see it this way is as an academic who entered the field with this kumbaya mentality of, we're gonna all work together for the benefit of the students and the benefit of society, and it will be at peace, we'll be one. Like, the shock of the competition and the backstabbing and the political nature of our work has made me much more monstrous than I ever would have been. I am much more aggressive because I'm an academic than I am naturally inclined to be. And so I think there's a bit of resonance with my own personal experience that is being read into this text. As I hear, especially as I hear Nicki Minaj, I love Nicki Minaj's verse, and if you haven't heard the song, you have to really hear her vocal production, because she'll say, like, I'm the rookie, just like, it's this just, like, you start off with this softness that questions, but then it gets more and more aggressive as you just start to get indignant about the ways in which your skill and your talent is being, doubted in spaces where it should be much more egalitarian. And so I read this as a critique of the music industry and how it then impacts the humanity of people that are trying to do a particular type of work. And it makes you fierce metaphorically and vernacularly, but it makes you fierce and monstrous, almost literally, just to survive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one of the things I appreciated, I also wanted to think not only what Munster Studies contributes to this project, but what hip hop studies contributes to Munster Studies, right? Because one of the things I appreciate about your analysis is like the balance of the attention to sound. I think sometimes those of us who are like English literature people, we see Sasquatch, oh, I'm gonna dig into the history of Sasquatch, and like we focus on the thematics, but for a lyricist, it's the sound of the word is as important, if not sometimes more important than the thematic history and resonance of the choice of that word. And that's something I really appreciate about your analysis, because I think sometimes when literature people, when we start looking at sound and film and stuff, we don't hold the art form, the context of the art form in which the text is being produced. We don't hold that as much as we should.
Absolutely. And one thing I'd add to what I said about, the relationship between monster studies and rap is I have a note on my paper that says rap can be goth as hell. It's not just virtue signifying, as some people can say. And so I would say as a genre, the whole thing is gothic, and that, those gothic elements get overlooked because it's, the stories and the tales and the music are just transformed a little bit into a different kind of context, but that all the gothic elements are there. And so I would love to see, more rap, but just other forms that are gothic and that are ignored and overlooked because they don't fit the schema of the field that people expect when you're talking about monster studies.
So far.
So far, absolutely, so far.
Hi, everybody. So again, thank you. I'm going to echo everybody. Thank you for these wonderful papers. This question is to Emily, and I'm like really parsing it out in my head, so it's going to come out a little jarbled, but I'll try. So I'm thinking about the impossible shot that they're trying to get. And of course, it has these practical benefits, right? Money, save the farm, all these kinds of things. But also there's this undercurrent of belief, and that certain bodies are not believed. So can you speak more to that? And did you come across that at the same time we get the first Black person to encounter or have an encounter of alien experience who's not believed and not given a record? So what does it mean for spectacled bodies not to be believed, and so they have to go for the impossible shot? So does that come up in the research in any particular kind of way?
I'm not sure about the not believing part, as far as like they wouldn't be believed, as far as OJ and M would not be believed. But certainly, if there's no story, then there's no belief at all. So I don't really know how to answer that, to be honest.
Can I respond? I would just say that that idea, the impossible shot not being believed, really resonates with me as an African American, with my students and in classes, with my colleagues, that, unless I bring the proof,
to show all your work,
nobody really gives me the space of credibility. Like I have to bring the impossible shot in order to be understood. And so I deeply understand that question. I had not thought of the impossible shot in quite that way, but you're right. It's not just about saving the farm, but it almost goes to the beginning of the movie where you see OJ bringing in the horse and he's just diminished in so many ways. And so that impossible shot brings that legitimacy and credibility that, that a lot of people need who are not believed.
And there's the moment where she calls, or it's not until Antlers Holst hears something about Agua Dulce on the news, I believe, that he finally allows himself to come down and believe in her. So yes, I do. I see it now.
To clarify, so she talks about how she wants to get to Oprah. Like, how do we get on Oprah, right? And so the undercurrent there is also that there's these like images of aliens, right? But they're all like blurry and you can't see them, but some people that put those images out are believed.
Right.
But they could never do that.
Right.
And so they have to push and they have to push. So it wasn't about does aliens exist?
Right.
That was never the question. It wasn't even about capturing these aliens. That was never the question. What do we do so that we get believed? And then that belief leads to something monetary, right? So that we can get paid for our belief, right? We have to have this evidence. And so that's kind of why I like keep rehearsing it over and over again. Even as they're on stage, like even their work, right? People don't believe how to deal with horses, right? They don't believe that their history, their ancestors was the jockey that was on the, like they're constantly not believing and constantly telling the story. And so then they become obsessed with this impossible shot. Yeah.
And I just wanted to add, what does it mean for Oprah to be believed as opposed to anyone else, right?
Great. Anybody else? Yeah.
Hello, thank you both for coming. I had a question for Imbalia. Knowing you're an Atlanta native, I was wondering if you had any thoughts or commentary about the Outkast song, ATLiens?
I know I should know the song. And my license plate, as I'm living in Tucson, is AT-Aliens, but I don't know the lyrics. And I can't believe this is recorded, because I feel shamed right now. I know a lot of other Outkast songs, but that one it just escapes me. So, yeah.
Okay, that's fine. I think I have a follow-up question. I know there is actually a genre of rap called horror rap, I believe, with, I think, 3-6 Mafia is like a group that's known as making horror rap, and I was wondering if you had any ideas or thoughts about horror rap as a genre in general.
Right. So, as part of this research, I've just been exploring all these genres of rap because, I wasn't familiar with it, like Gravediggers and, going back and listening to Lil Wayne and other people associated with like Southern hardcore rap and horror rap. And I don't really have any comments. For me, it's just, wow, I didn't realize this exists. I didn't realize it overlapped with this area of research and musical interest that people have accused me of being very white. Like, I listen to a lot of rock. I listen to goth and things like that. And this idea that, I'm listening to music that's not far removed from the music that is naturally associated with me as a Black person has been this really interesting journey and ride. I have really appreciated it, especially since there are always certain kinds of rap songs I've been drawn to because I love, as a linguist, I love words. And so I like good music and storytelling, and that's been consistent for me. So I would say this journey really brings my life back to me full circle, and I appreciate that. I want to just come back to the first question, one of the questions about, Dorian Gray and, Stevenson's book and this undercurrent of gayness or queerness within the text. Because it also reminds me that as I've been reading, people have said, well, how do you see race within this story? Especially you have Bon Iver, the one white guy, and he starts off the piece. And, there are all these other themes that really, one could analyze the text for them. But, and I will continue to think about this deeply, but as I come back to the songs, all I really hear is the critique of the music industry, and that, that it doesn't deal with things outside of how we see the genre. It's a Black masculine genre. Nothing else matters. And that's where I'm stuck at this moment, that it is really about the music industry and what it does to people and the kinds of musicians that it will then tend to churn out for success. So I would love to hear if people have other thoughts around that and if they can pull it out of the text, because I'm all about, well, what does the text say? But yeah, that's kind of where I am now.
Yeah, and one of the things I keep thinking about is how these currents that already exist in culture, what happens when the context is capitalism that the people who created the culture don't control. Like wordplay and competition has like that is a part of like Black culture, you know, clowning each other, you know. But what happens when you get all these white media people get in it and all these, you know, like what happens to it, and how does it become an enactment of monstrosity in a certain way? So I think that that's something to hold in tension there, is people are being forced to act monstrous, but there's also some actual, you know, like competition wordplay. Like, I'm a murder you doesn't literally mean I'm a murder you, you know, like, you know, so I just think those are things to like keep in tension when we talk about how Black art forms intersect with these thematics in a context that does exploit them. Yeah.
Great. Edmund?
Thank you for sharing. I don't know whether this is a question or a comment, but it goes to Emily. So I was thinking about Peele's filmography, right? So Get Out, Us, and Nope, right? And it seems there's this kind of idea of abduction, displacement. Specifically, I'm thinking about, because you're framing like the Black hero, right? Which is kind of suggestive of there being a villain, right? For me, and this is, so my dissertation chair would say that when he's watching a horror movie, he's always rooting for the monster, right? The monster has to win. I'm thinking about how we frame villainy, right? You know, and for me, in Nope, the extraterrestrial doesn't quite fit, for me, the category of villain. And so, I don't know, just something to think about.
Well, I think that maybe, so obviously it's doing what it needs to do. It's consuming to continue living or whatever. But I think for me, I read it as a villain because I'm just kind of seeing what Peele is injecting into that. So yeah, I don't specifically know if it was his intent to turn it into what I'm making it, but it's just sort of how I saw it. So yeah, it might not necessarily be a villain itself, but it certainly is doing some pretty horrific things to people, and so that's why I sort of read it as the villain. The same with Jupe. I mean, Jupe's just trying to make money and you know, continue his old fame as a child actor and take care of his family, but in doing so, monstrous actions or monstrous consequences occur. So is he necessarily a villain? I'm not sure.
Let's see what happens if he's not.
Yeah. I think we have time for one more comment, if anybody's got anything they're dying to say. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, panel. Thank you so much.